So, when it comes to blessings, what comes to your mind? What are the ideas that you have about blessings? Is it material prosperity? Is it physical appearance? Is it um, some other type of, you can even say, reward for the flesh? Because I think this is an important question when we talk about blessings, because the Lord says multiple times that He'll bless us. And I think sometimes we have a prepackaged notion of what it means to be blessed and what that looks like. And I think oftentimes, I think a lot of people associate it with temporal blessing. And this video is not to say that God doesn't bless us temporally in terms of wealth or health or things like that. Um, I will say, though, if He does bless us temporally, it will be either because He'll use the wealth we have to then bless others. That's kind of how God works. It replicates outward, or he'll will be, well, if it's temporal, especially with wealth, that blessing will come based on our heed and diligence to the conditions that bring about, or the causes that bring about, the blessing of wealth. And so it will be a byproduct of that. So but what I really want to get at in this video is not really getting to the issue of wealth and blessing, but I want to get it more into this issue of what a blessing is, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it means. For instance, I think if someone goes through severe suffering and trials, that actually could be a blessing. And I had another video about this idea recorded in September, and maybe I'll post that after this because I think this is a good introduction to an idea that I was discussing in September. But going back, make sure I don't lose track of my train of thought here, is we have different ideas of what blessing mean. And does suffering, going back to the question, does suffering equal a blessing? Well, if that suffering shows you a better way and you grow from it, isn't that a blessing? Now, I'm not saying that everything that we go through, and I'm not saying that the end times, people who suffer in the end times are going to be blessed. Well, I want to be very careful when I say this because some people will. So the righteous will undergo further suffering and grow thereby. But the wicked, and I think the scriptures show that the judgment on the wicked is a curse. I think largely because they won't be at the level where they can use the suffering to advance themselves because they haven't acquired the prerequisite knowledge to advance. And so it just becomes like a flood and crashes down on them, and they just collapse and they curse God and want to die. So I want to be very clear that, um, especially the end time judgments and the destruction that will follow and occur therein or therefrom, it doesn't, I'm not saying that blessings, that those who are wicked and they suffer are blessed necessarily. It could be. I think if they had the right knowledge, it could be, and it could turn them to God, but it's not necessarily. So, in any case, blessings, going back to the person who's suffering and they learn from it, could that be a blessing? I think there's an argument that it could be, right? Even through my life, I had some suffering that got me out of my pride and humbled me. And because of that, I repented and forsake my sins and submitted and surrendered myself fully to the Lord. That now I'm on a path of happiness that I've never known before. And all the things I did in the past try to be happy were just these band-aids to the suffering I was going through. And it would just be this fluctuating ebb and flow type suffering where if I was having a good day, if, you know, um, if uh, sports were on, or if I was hanging out with friends, or if I met a cute girl or something like that, those would be the things that give me a boost and, oh, everything's going great. But then once that fades, then I go back to my, depression, anxiety, and it was just this ebb and flow, and I never felt happy, and I kept trying to do things to feel happy. It wasn't until the Lord, took everything from me that I valued, that then it pushed me to turn to Him and realize that what I thought mattered didn't, and that what really mattered was my relationship with the Lord. And I thought that was a blessing. I mean, that's a blessing, and it was a suffering, and it was a refiner's fire, like any fire I felt, and it tried me to the utmost extreme. And that someone looking at me from maybe a third person point of view might say, wow, that guy's really just having a hard time, and he is really just not favored of the Lord, or the Lord just really has an issue with him. But that would be incorrect conclusion, because that actually was a blessing, and it actually refined me and got rid of my false beliefs so that I could be set on a path of happiness. And so what this video, and I guess that other video in September, is about is sometimes what seems like a curse is not really, and it's actually a blessing. And one of the examples I have right now is just with correction and rejoicing in correction, and how someone who gives you and corrects you in your behavior could actually be the blessing that God has been wanting to give you, because it's that correction in behavior that can change your patterns and systems of thought that are bringing about the negative outcome and the sadness. And so I had an example recently at work. So I'm a lawyer, and for lawyers, I do litigation. So it's competitive, and there is pressure to, well, first there's deadlines. That's one pressure, but also to make a good argument and to persuade the judge, because we have to persuade the judge, and that helps our client. And sometimes just the way you write something is not going to persuade the judge. If you just write a little bit differently, it could. Because part of good legal writing is making sure that your arguments are very clear. And so we don't get in, it's pretty dry, to be honest. Legal writing is dry, but it's very clear and it's very precise. Well, at least we try to be very precise, so there's no ambiguity, because we want the court to understand our argument perfectly. We don't want the court to have a different conclusion that we're not making, or a different argument we're not making, or get caught up in some ambiguity. So we try to be very clear. And recently I had some feedback from a partner in my law firm who showed me a better way. So it's not that I was doing bad. It wasn't that my writing was terrible, but he said, hey, here is something, try this out, and I think it will help you to be even more fine-tuned and precise and specific in your arguments. Because with legal writing, there is, basically it's deductive. You have an issue, right, that the court needs to address, the dispute, and then you cite some rules, which is your first premise, and then you argue from that, which is your second premise, and then you get to your conclusion, right? And you really want to make it clear for the court, well, at least what I've learned, is that what the issues are, what the rule is, what the authority the court has to decide that issue, and then why it should decide in your client's favor. And it looks like I wasn't doing that as clear as I could have. And it looks like I was kind of getting sloppy, and I didn't have that clear framework set out, that deductive framework that the court could follow. And it possibly meant that the court might not be fully understanding my arguments, and not doing an effective job of being an advocate. And so I got that feedback. But when I got that feedback, I wasn't like, oh, how dare you, why are you doing that? Or, it felt kind of bad. I was like, oh man, I'm not doing what I thought. I thought I was doing really well, and now this comes out, and shoot. But that was just a brief moment, because what that is I had an opportunity to improve my writing and to become a better lawyer. I want to be a good lawyer. I want to be good at what I do. I don't know if I want to be the best lawyer ever, because that requires time and sacrifice that I just don't care for. I'd rather do things that the Lord would have me do. Now, if the Lord wanted me to do that, sure. But I know lawyers who are at the top of their game, and their family lives are ruined. They're on their third marriage. Their kids hate them. They work all the time. That's not what I have for me. So, and that's not what I want. But I do want to be good. And I want to be good and ethical and proficient and reliable, and someone who people say, oh, he's a good lawyer. He knows what he's doing. And so that's my goal. Like, professionally, that's my goal. And my whole goal in my whole life, I have bigger goals than that. But professionally, that's my goal. And the partner gave me a key to how I can become better. And if I would just say, and just, respond offensively and say, oh, I don't know, I'm going to do that, or and reject the advice, well, then I'm rejecting the thing that's going to help me to become better. And what I'm getting at is that was a blessing. That was a blessing. I have been, not fully praying to God to become a better. I have other things, but like the back of my mind, I'm always like, help me, Lord, to become better. Help me become better. And then I had this partner give me advice saying, hey, this is what you should do. Try this out. This will help. You're not doing that right now. Implement it. And so I evaluated, I thought about it and said, yeah, I think this will work. And so what seemed like, you know, as someone who's really sensitive, that might be a mean thing. Like, oh, you're shooting me down. You're not helping me. Or you're being mean or whatever people say to correction. Where in actuality, the correction was a blessing because now I have something I can look at and maybe I don't have to accept it fully based on whether it's accurate or not, although I think it is as I've thought about it, and I'm going to implement it. And why not? Because now I have this little insight in how to become better. And that's a blessing. And so the ultimate thing to point out in this video is that corrections are a blessing. If someone corrects your behavior, if someone shows you a better way to be, that is a blessing from God. Believe it or not. So when it talks about the windows of heaven being poured out and blessings that you can't receive it, well, sometimes people can't receive it because it comes prepackaged. Sometimes the blessing that God pours out upon you that you're not willing to receive. Let me go back. Why don't people receive the blessing? Because the blessing isn't coming to them in a way that they would expect the blessing to come, right? When God says, I'll pour out the windows of heaven that you can't receive it, maybe it might be just someone in your family who points out your mistakes and shows that your behavior is poor or you have bad habits and is giving you a way to become happy and you reject it because it offends you. Well, yeah, you're not receiving the blessing. You can't receive it. You aren't able to fully embrace it. And so part of having room to receive a blessing is having the outlook, the disposition to be humble and receive whatever God throws your way, and opening yourself up fully. That's what it means to have soft heart. A hard heart is one that pushes back. You can't penetrate, but a soft heart can. And so I think when it talks about having, and it might be another meaning to that, but I think there is some truth when it says pour out the windows of heaven that there won't be room to receive it. You first have to make a room to receive the blessing, and that comes from being humble and realizing that blessings come in different ways. And especially in this video, to embrace correction. I rejoice in it. I'm so glad I was told that, hey, the writing could be better. And yeah, it's taking some time to learn, but I'm going to be better. I'm just going to make me better. And that's what I wanted. So why would I reject it? That's silly. It means if I did, then when I'm praying to God, I'm not praying with real intent because I really don't want to be a good lawyer. Because if I really want to be a good lawyer, I would do whatever it takes to be a good lawyer. It's that simple. So embrace correction. Let people correct you. Don't be offended. Don't be like the modern world today where we have to measure the message by who says it, not on the truth given, right? So if someone's a male telling a female something, well, that can't happen. Or it has to be female to female or a black person to black person. That's ridiculous. And we're setting ourselves up to absolutely fail and cut ourselves from all truth. Truth comes from wherever it comes. And what you have to do is like what Alma says, is you take the truth, the principle, plant it, consider it, see if it grows, see if there's some light to it. And then if it is, then water, nourish it, and then expand. And that's how we grow. But that also means that we need to be people of discernment. And that's why it's so important that we are fully surrendered to God so that we have the full Spirit with us so then we can properly discern whether that correction is accurate or not. Because if we are just full in sin, that correction is going to offend us and we're just going to reject it because we're offended. And we're not going to be with a mindset of exploring whether that thing is actually true. And if it is, taking advantage of it, bringing it in, and growing thereby. So, message of this video, seek correction, cherish it, love it, value it. If it's bad correction and someone corrects you and you're like, no, I don't think that's right, okay, disregard it. It's fine. If it is, savor it because that is a blessing from God. God is giving you some light in your life to make your life better and to achieve your desires. It all just comes from cause and effect. There's no magical snap of the fingers. God works from cause and effect, and he will lead you exactly on the path. And if you come across something that's affecting that, it might mean that you don't want what you say you want because you're not willing to take the next step. So embrace it. God loves us, and He is out there always seeking to improve us. And don't reject any sign of correction. Embrace it, at least evaluate it, and if it's true, embrace it with your whole soul because it's a blessing from God who loves you.